Thank you all for joining. We have some great attendance and it's climbing quickly right now, I can see. Excited to have you all on here. We've got some great content and of course, everybody loves Esther. So who doesn't want to come on and see what Esther is up to and what she's got to say about helping us all in our sort of daily walk as we troubleshoot Citrix end user experience. So we're focused on logons today. Like I said, joined by Esther Barthel. She's a former CTP. I've got Martin Quinnen joining us as well, who's one of our client success engineers. And I am Kiri Pence. I'm on the product team. So I'm hosting, but I promise you, once we start getting into the tech talk, I'm going to take a back seat and let Esther and Martin take it from there. We want this to be an engaging session for everyone. So please ask questions. You've got the question and answer or the question tab in your GoToWebinar toolbar. If you all haven't been on a GoToWebinar webinar recently, you have already noticed there's a new interface. So it takes a little bit of learning curve, at least it has for me, to make sure you can find where the location of the questions are. But if you look at the toolbar across the top, there should be a little question button up there with a little question mark on it, and that's where you'll go ahead and put your questions in. We'll try to get to as many of them as we can on this session. And then we will have a quick poll right before we get started. Just want to get kind of a lay of the land and see what kind of DAS, VDI technologies you guys are using today. Obviously, everyone, I assume, on this webinar is using Citrix, since it is a Citrix Troubleshooting Masterclass, but that doesn't mean it's the only thing you're using. So it just helps inform us as we build out future sessions to understand kind of what technologies we need to cover off on. So to get started, there are a lot of new people on the webinar, so I'm going to do just a quick introduction of who Goliath is. If you haven't been on a Goliath webinar, just an introduction of us, what it is that we do. Like I said, we'll do a quick poll, and then we're going to jump right into the troubleshooting use cases, and that's where Esther is going to jump in with Martin and talk through some interesting scenarios. A lot of you guys are dealing with the new Citrix NetScaler licensing issue right now. So we're going to talk about that and how it impacts ability to access applications. We'll dig into Citrix is slow, tied specifically to logon issues. Of course, you guys get the Citrix is slow complaint, and then it's up to you to figure out why is it slow. Are they talking about logons? Are they talking about the session, etc. And then we're going to talk about logon slowness that is due to Windows 11 migration and build updates. So that's something that we're hearing a lot about recently. So we wanted to do a follow-on on that. We started the conversation last month. We're going to do a follow-on on that. And then logon issues that are tied to profile load. So lots of great content for you. Again, if you've got questions, don't hesitate to put them into the question panel, and we'll make sure we get to as many as we can before the webinar ends. And if we can't get to them all, we'll definitely make sure that we follow up with you afterwards. All right, so let's click on, start off with a quick poll. You just find, there it is. Again, learning curve for me as well on the new interface. All right, so what VDI, DAS, or desktop solutions are you currently using or considering deploying in your environment? Again, I assume everybody is going to be checking Citrix, and this is a multi-select, so you can select all. Some of you have Citrix and Horizon. I know some of our customers do. Some of you are considering moving away from Citrix or VDI and DAS altogether. We're hearing a lot more people moving away from VDI DAS and just going to thick clients again. And then some of you are going, away from VDI. You're using, secure browser like Parallels or some other technologies. So go ahead and take a moment. That just gives us, again, a little bit of the lay of the land. I assume everybody will select Citrix, but I'm just curious as to what else you guys are looking at and using. Give it just another 5 seconds or so. Lots of responses. All right, we're going to end this. We'll share the results so that you guys can see it. I assume you can see the results. I can't see on my side if you can see them.
I can see them.
Oh, so perfect. So several on Omnissa Horizon as well. It looks like a lot of you are looking at AVD, Windows 365, or Amazon Workspaces. And yeah, like I said, we've been hearing a lot of people are considering moving away from VDI DAS altogether and just going back to a thick client setup. All right, well, thank you guys for taking time to fill that out and give us a little bit of insight as to what's going on in your environment. So just by way, again, of quick introduction for all the people who are new on the session, Goliath is IT observability. Any VDI DAS platform, doesn't matter if it's on-prem, cloud, or sub-hybrid configuration. What we do is we enable IT effectively to move from being reactive all the time to being proactive. And we're doing that by providing IT professionals like yourselves the ability to get ahead of issues before the end users are actually impacted. That's really where we want to be, is get ahead of them before the end users are impacted. But inevitably issues arise, so giving you the ability to isolate and troubleshoot them quickly, and then documentation that proves root cause of the end user experience issues so that you can put permanent resolution in place. So, a scenario that we've heard before, you ever find yourself in a situation where maybe you're trying to communicate the need to the networking team that you need additional bandwidth, like you suspect that some of the slowness issues that your end users are having are tied to bandwidth, or maybe there's a storage issue trying to get more resources from the storage team. Now, you don't have any data to support that. It's kind of a hunch. You've sort of done the disqualification process as you've troubleshooted user sessions, and that's kind of where you're left with. But you don't have any data to go back to the team that proves the need. This is exactly the type of situation that we're helping organizations resolve. Now, the IT delivery infrastructure, super complex. You already know this. I'm not telling you anything you don't know. Oftentimes, there's 15, 20 plus unaffiliated vendor technologies that have to work in concert almost miraculously to deliver a good end user experience. And Citrix is only a piece of that complexity. And it sounds like, even from the poll, many of you are using more than just Citrix from a VDI DAS perspective. So you've got extra layers of complexity there as well. If you're a healthcare organization, you've got the EHR layered on top of that, which is a massive piece of complexity that goes into your organization. So it takes purpose-built technology to identify within this mesh of integrated technologies which IT elements actually responsible for the poor performance that your end users are experiencing. So most of your organizations are probably a lot like this. You've got a lot of monitoring tools across your IT stack, but the problem is that IT is siloed, and they're in different groups, like you see it sort of siloed on the slide here. Each one has their own monitoring tools. They're all focused on their own piece of the IT stack, and these tools are great and they work well for what they're designed to do, which is solely monitor their own piece of the technology stack. So whether it's endpoint, networking, storage, servers, doesn't matter. They've got monitoring tools for those, but they're only focused on their piece of the stack. So the typical troubleshooting approach for most organizations is that when IT is siloed like this, they look at each element individually. So if they're all healthy, then the end user experience must be good as well. Sort of that's the inference. Where it gets frustrating, and this is probably something that you all deal with regularly, is when you're pulled together, you're troubleshooting an issue. Maybe it's a big issue. You've got an incident response team, and every person, every representative of the IT team is looking at their own element, their own monitoring tools, and everything is good, but the end user experience is still poor. And this is when the finger pointing starts. How do you go to the networking team and tell them that bandwidth is the issue when you don't have any data points to actually point to that? And their monitoring tools are telling them everything is fine. And that's why we take a different approach to change sort of that paradigm of how IT gets to troubleshoot end user experience issues, particularly how the VDI DAS team, the Citrix team does it, because you guys find yourself on the defense most of the time. So instead of trying to infer the quality of the end user experience based on all of those individual IT elements and what their monitoring tools are telling them, we start with the end user themselves, and then we inform outwardly from there. So we can quickly identify which one, sometimes there's more than one, of the IT elements that are actually impacting the end user experience. We then serve up that data correlated into a single view so that the IT team, and in this case, so that you guys as the Citrix team, can quickly identify where the root cause is at and then remediate it if it's on the Citrix side, or communicate with each of the IT siloed constituents if it's on their side with data to prove it. So that's just sort of a high-level introduction overview for anybody that's new and not familiar with Goliath. What we're going to transition to next is jumping right into actual troubleshooting use cases. So of course, you'll get an opportunity to kind of see it in play. And you'll also hear Esther's perspective as well. She's been doing this for a minute. So she's familiar with sort of the plight of the Citrix defense team, as we hear it called, where the ticket comes in, Citrix is slow. It's vague. Nobody knows. Your users aren't technical. They don't know how to tell you what's wrong. They're just like, Citrix is terrible today. Somebody needs to fix this. And it's up to you then to go figure out how to fix it. So as stated in the beginning, I'm going to bring Esther on and Martin on. We're going to jump into the use cases. Give me just a moment to switch Martin over to presenter so that he can start sharing his screen. Again, we're going to start with a use case around not being able to access the application, specifically talking about the new NetScaler licensing issues that seems to be causing some problems and wreaking some havoc. And then we'll talk about sort of that vague Citrix is slow. How do we identify where the cause is? In this case, we'll focus on logins since that's the focus of the webinar. And then we'll talk about the impact of Windows 11 migration build updates on logon process and profile load issues. So with that, Esther, Martin, I'll turn it over to you all.
Thank you. And
thanks,
thank you also for getting all the spoilers out right with this introduction. I was trying to build it up and not directly pinpoint who would be.
They're not listening to me anyways, Esther, so they didn't hear it. They're going to hear it come from you for the first time. They've been waiting for you to join.
No, because I think one of the big lessons learned in my career and in all the Citrix troubleshooting that I've been doing is that you need to be careful about pinpointing where you think the root cause is, as you said at the introduction, without having any data to back up that claim. So that's why I basically wanted to start off with if we're talking about applications and users starting up their Citrix environment, whether it's a published application or a published desktop, that already is the first trigger for them to say, well, I'm not getting my applications up and running, or I'm not connecting to my application. So my efficiency in work is already diminished. So that's where I wanted to start with the story without going like, okay, we all know that Citrix decided to change their licensing, especially for the NetScalers, to mention just one of the many components that we have in our Citrix infrastructure. And it's very actual because basically they changed their licensing as of yesterday, April 15th, which means that now instead of having a local license file on your NetScaler, you now have to make sure that that NetScaler is communicating with the Citrix license server, which is hosted obviously in the control plane. It's not easy to always have a full scope, a full sight on all the different Citrix infrastructure components and how they operate and if they're performing correctly. But I do know that usually the ticketing starts with a user complaining that either one or more of their applications are not working, especially if you're using published applications within your Citrix environment. And I think one of the big things. Thank you, Martin, for taking on that.
Trying to time it well for you.
Perfect. No, I love that, because one of the things that you're being triggered by that ticketing system or by that issue that is mentioned by the end user is that you want to have an overview of your applications and whether or not connectivity can be an issue. So this is one of the things, if we're talking about observability, where you really need that inside data or your insights in application availability. And voila, this is where Goliath obviously helps you out a lot, because this is one of the dashboards that I really love. So maybe you can even help me out here a little bit by
Yeah, I'd love to
explaining to.
walk through this page a little bit.
Perfect.
So just as you mentioned there, Esther, right? The main challenge of trying to start to get ahead of even logon issues is, can the users log on? Are users able to launch those applications or desktop resources, whatever you're publishing for them, and be able to get in before they end up sending a ticket up saying, I can't launch, I can't get in, or maybe it's giving me a black screen or rejecting me out every time I try and click the application, right? So one of the pieces of the Goliath Performance Monitor that you're seeing here on screen is our application availability feature, which more aptly is commonly called our early warning system. Reason being is this is deployed using a series of essentially endpoints deployed on physical locations, physical devices, maybe in the cloud and regions where you have remote users attempting to access your environment. And what it does on a scheduled basis is launch real Citrix or Omnissa Horizon sessions into your environment, allowing you to baseline from your different locations if your applications are up and accessible, as well as which applications are impacted by things like slower response times, or if we are happening to see something like a failure, what stage of the logon is it starting to see a problem with? Something like an access and authentication failure is going to take us in a different direction than maybe, say, the last stage enumeration.
Is this only focused on the published applications, or does it also allow you to, if you have a published desktop, to see if it's available or not?
Yep, it's any resource that's published on, say, like the storefront, for example. So any resource,
Okay.
a desktop, an application, whatever your users are going to be expecting to get into at, Monday morning after you run an upgrade, or maybe this morning after you did a licensing activation service change, right? Those types of changes tend to catch people a little bit off guard because maybe you make a change, you think you have everything right, and all of a sudden that one or two or hopefully not, but more tickets come in saying, I can't launch, I can't get in. And all of a sudden, you're now facing an outage and downtime trying to investigate what could have possibly gone wrong here. While instead, this is going to give you that little bit of a security and early warning system ahead of time.
So that makes sense. It's really your first go-to dashboard to have that overview of, are all my applications up and running, and are the desktops available?
Exactly. Now, of course, the entire Citrix delivery infrastructure, is Kiri kind of covered in that initial slide, as well as you've already discussed, depends on a couple of different dependencies between those different machines and all of the different vendor softwares running between to try and make sure they're running in concert to be able to deliver the actual users into their applications. Where I'm going to navigate over to along the left side navigation pane in Goliath here is over to our automatic discovery and dependency map, which will give you a little bit more visibility past just the, can my users log in, and obviously giving you that jump start if they can't. But when it comes down to actually troubleshooting, taking the hints from maybe where a failure occurred to actually getting down to root cause. In just another click, I'm now on a automatic discovery and dependency map of the delivery infrastructure for Citrix here. Now able to see all those devices from things like those NetScaler gateways, all important as of this morning, as well
Yep.
as those storefronts, brokers, and even things like a traditional license server if you have it on premise, your database, and all those kind of different dependencies that they're going to rely on.
So this is really like the health check for each and every component within the Citrix infrastructure, and see if the communication between those components are working, and if the components themselves are healthy, so to speak.
Exactly. Right. And a little bit different than even just something like a site-wide health check. This is that real-time dashboard. You can get alerts based on this, have your incidents generated that say, hey, my NetScaler is not performing appropriately, or we're seeing a problem that could potentially impact our users. We can obviously see things like trends of failures if we're starting to see users actually impacted, how our concurrency is doing. If all of a sudden user volume starts dropping, we might have an issue we need to start taking a look at. And that's where you can even drill into the various servers here to be able to see what exactly is wrong with intelligent detection across the entire environment, able to show you what is happening on any individual machine.
And does this require additional agents to be installed on those different components? Or are you using like network traffic to determine the health of each component?
Yeah, great question. It's a combination. So on things like your core brokers and storefront machines, we'll traditionally deploy the Goliath lightweight intelligent agent, which is extremely lightweight piece of software that's just going to go in and be able to keep an eye on the sort of boots on the ground configurations, statuses, and performance of the machines. Moving out to things like your net scalers or additional, that's where we are pulling in things like your network traffic, as well as things like SNMP traps to be able to understand when those failures occur, layering those in with the rest of the performance of the environment.
Yeah, so for those appliances basically that are more like a black box, you still have enough means to pull out the data to determine the health.
Exactly correct, right? So we'll be able to even see if users are getting rejected at, say, that first gateway layer, where those are starting to come in. You'll obviously have the application availability feature giving you that early warning to start getting ahead of this before these failures spike far too high, and then getting that insight as to exactly where your issue is occurring before you have to dig into the rest of the entire environment.
Okay, cool. So that also basically gives me the ability to also determine if it's an isolated incident that a user is reporting, or if it's becoming more like a problem because over time more users are starting to report similar incidents.
Exactly right, right? Because if we have a single user who's calling in saying, I can't log on to my application or my desktop, and everything from our software, say from the baseline logons, are performing just fine, we know we probably have a slightly more isolated issue. Whereas if we're starting to get an alert or a failure here, that's almost a direct indication that you have something a little bit more site-wide or global that's going to be impacting quite a lot of users.
And I think you already have like over 250 different metrics that you can track down, monitor, but also configure alerts for.
That's exactly it. Yep, you got the number right too, Esther. Over
I did
250
my
different
own work.
events. Over 250 different events, conditions, and failure points. Things that'll either impact end user experience, say for example, lengthen a logon experience, or cause degraded performance in the environment too. All of a sudden, if we're starting to see a particular process running hot on memory on a delivery controller, or something that we might need to be concerned about regarding maybe it's a reporting issue or critical services that need to be running on that machine, all of that's going to be available and monitored in real time and able to be alerted on. Those alerts also fully able to export to like your ITSM softwares if you're going to be tracking incidents and need to field those actions appropriately, as well as even incorporating things like automatic remediation, otherwise auto healing, where we can execute a response action regarding maybe a service that's gone down, spin it back up, maybe a process that's running a little bit too rampant, maybe tamper it down, restart that if possible during the day to be able to remediate those issues a little bit quicker without you having to put actual eyes and hands on every single issue that might occur.
Awesome. You already had me at automation. But does that also mean that if from my own experience, because each and every environment has their own little quirks or even has different business rules that you need to be compliant with, does it also allow me to build custom remediation like scripts and have that linked or configured with different alerts?
100%. And working day to day in the product on top of everything else we'll go through today, it's one of my favorite features in the product to be able to build a specific check that is unique to an environment. Maybe it's unique to your individual application or expectations for the environment, that you can make sure that even the tiniest quirks that you end up having to deal with on a day-to-day basis, you at least have monitoring, if not auto healing, applied to.
Perfect, because that's one of the, I think, added values that I bring to the table is to get the engineers to also think more in standardized processes or standardized remediation, and then make that even more efficient by adding some automation where applicable, so to speak.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, I think we're already off to a great start to get me convinced that you are providing added value for giving me better insights into my Citrix environments. I know I also kind of keep track of time, not all too well, but we do have some other topics that we also wanted to zoom in. For instance, one of the things that we said is, well, it's a very common incident report where users say, well, Citrix is slow. And that's usually, and we can have a whole debate about it, because that Citrix logo is very visual, and that's the first thing that users see when things are breaking down for them. But I think it's also very important to have an open conversation with the end user on trying to figure out why Citrix is slow. And I usually am not the type of engineer that loves to just call the end user and have that conversation, because I don't want to give the end user a feeling that they need to be tech savvy and need to understand all the technical questions that I'm asking them on getting the right insights into their experience. So I know, see, you're already way ahead of me. I was going to say, I know you probably have some dashboards that will give me like an initial insights in what is the user facing, maybe even if it is an incident that spent a bit more time in the box before I started to get some time for it, to also have a more historical view of the data. See, yes. So it's
Yep,
not just
all
real
available.
time. I can always say, no, please give me an overview of all the different components and the situation, like a snapshot, but then time limited. Oh, see, he's already doing that. Awesome.
Exactly. Now, of course, when it comes to something like that Citrix is slow complaint, and we would all love for a user to call in and say, hey, this one policy is really slowing down my logins. Can you fix it for me? Right? But oftentimes, and I think we can all probably relate to, that's never the case. It won't launch, or it's taking too long, and you're trying to figure out even what is taking too long. So your logon,
Yes.
is it you're in session? Are you trying to submit a workflow in an application that is taking too long, right? None of that is really ever conveyed from our end users. And so being able to baseline user experience from a live dashboard, as well as available in some of our reports, are going to be extremely helpful tools to allow you to understand, where are my problem areas? Even right up here at the front, as we just get started, this is really kind of the homepage in the product that you would normally log into. I started you at application availability just because it was topical, but this is
Yep.
where, if you first log in, whether a user's ticket has come in and you need to put in a user's name, or maybe you just want to understand where our trends are coming from. We can understand things like our user concurrency, average metrics, are logons on the rise or something like that, as well as, I think really topical here, are actual users who are impacted. How many users are seeing slow performance or maybe slow logons over my time period in the past couple of days that I might want to pay attention to? All of this we can drill into to get down to root cause, but even just the base level understanding to be able to take the troubleshooting in the right direction, starting from a very simple sentence of Citrix is slow, is already going to be
Yep.
a massive boost to your productivity.
Yeah, so even before I start to zoom in on a user session, you're basically already showing the trends that have been have been derived from the data that you're collecting, right?
Exactly. Now, of
Oh,
course, I think
I'm very visual, so I love all the statistics and the numbers. That definitely helps in quickly finding your way across this whole Citrix is slow uh, challenge, so to speak.
exactly. Now, of course, when we get down into trying to troubleshoot it, right, understanding what the actual data looks like is going to be critically important. Part of the topic to kind of discuss as part of this point of the presentation is, of course, getting down to even things like a policy that might be impacting one or multiple users. If I were to say, for example, just go into my users who are experiencing long logons on average during my time frame here, I'll immediately pull up, and what I have are those individual logons that users have experienced. I can see my repeat offenders, who's seeing the worst performance, as well as even draw correlations between our users coming from different or similar locations, similar networks or connection points that I need to be aware of to help me understand where the issue might be coming from. And so again, just a layout of, instead of having to search and go through to understand where my issues could possibly be coming from, I'm going to be starting to bubble this up to the top of, here are the worst impacted users. And then single click into any of these will take you into all of the details where I can see things like the full breakdown of the entire session. Now, of course, there's a lot of data in here. I don't want to run away with the presentation at this point. But I guess, Esther, some of the common things that maybe you've seen over your career that we might want to take a look at seeing, right? Whether it's policy related or maybe even related to something like the license service we were just talking about, some of those things that can really impact users. What would be key points that we'd want to look at when we get into something like looking at an individual user?
Well, from my experience, one of the things that I always double check is, especially if we're talking about the logon times taking a long time, you really need to deep dive into that logon process and look at the different like stages, so to speak, that you have within that logon process. And from my experience, usually it can be group policy related, or maybe even I'm trying to almost do like multitasking by selecting all the different cases in my head that come to mind. Another thing that I've seen is profiles taking a long time to load, and that obviously depends on what your profiling solution is. But I guess GPOs is definitely the first one that I would love to
Sure.
dig into.
Yeah, absolutely. And so getting into like the individual data, and again, this is just a single user, but then being able to report on this at a higher level, totally possible in the product as well. I generally find when that ticket comes in, we want to find that user, right? Luckily, Glide's pulling in every single session in the environment, retaining that historically. So whenever I see a logon that's maybe a little higher than I want to see it, I can drill in, and in 2 clicks after I've gotten to the user session, I get a full breakdown of the entire logon process. Now, keeping in
Yeah, so
mind
those are the different
details.
stages that I was referring to.
Exactly, right? And of course, key details such as, I mean, did the user upgrade their workspace app recently? If we've had a recent upgrade that needed to go out, that's going to be an important key detail I want to keep top of mind, top of screen, but also be able to come down and see exactly what stages are comprising the duration that we're really seeing that user impacted by, right? Is it within the delivery infrastructure that I need to go take into that dependency map to see what could be impacting that user? Or are we seeing things like profile and policy level issues that are after we've connected? We can kind of draw this imaginary line halfway through. We start talking to the Windows OS here during the logon process. And so being able to see where those delays are coming from, or in some cases even rule them out, is going to be critically important, even allowing us to get all the way down to things like the mapping drives and printers as part of the logon process, loading the profile at the Windows level. All of this brought into one place. No need to run a script or on-demand investigation to try and get all of this. Can all be brought straight to you in 2 clicks to understand what this is looking like for any individual user.
Can I also configure different like thresholds, like based on my baseline? Excuse me. I know that normally loading my group policies takes this amount of seconds, and have that as like the thresholds that it needs to be performing within, so I can more visually see, oh, now I'm running over the threshold that I configured. Because of course, different companies, different environments have different policy settings.
Mm-hmm.
So for some, it can be perfectly acceptable that it takes a couple of seconds or maybe even tens of seconds, where others are saying, well, we only have like 2 or 3 settings within our policies, And for us, that threshold is way too long.
Yeah, excellent question. And I think something that's probably really applicable to something like our reports that come out of the technology. So what I've shown you here, individual investigation, right? But if
Yep.
I want to understand, do I have any outliers? Is maybe one policy that I've misapplied impacting a whole bunch of my users? You can get that type of visibility from things like our scorecards, where you're able to see in this type of a report that comes out of the technology. It can be scheduled on a regular basis, run on a weekly, daily, however you'd like it type of basis, able to baseline logon duration across your entire user base and tell you which are over and under thresholds, all completely customizable to your environment, and then able to show you who are my outliers, maybe based on one really poor experience, or maybe a bit more of a trend that we have users who might be seeing longer impacts on a regular basis.
Wow. So this also allows me to even better understand if changes are happening within my environment. For instance, let's say a Windows update, or maybe even the Citrix app being updated to a new version. Then I can also see if that has impact on the metrics, or basically the
Exactly.
scorecard.
Yeah, one of the lovely things about having historical data in a product like this, right, is being able to actually answer that question when you start troubleshooting and you go, what was it before? Right? I'm looking at this value, but I'm not 100% sure. I think it was a little bit lower, but trying to get that data out can sometimes be a bit of a struggle. And that's where having the ability to run these types of reports over, say, a week, retain them historically, or maybe even just go back in time if I need to on demand one of these reports for the Monday 3 days ago that I want to take a look at before I made my change. I can run those side by side and then compare the numbers to really see if I have a measurable impact from a recent change I made.
Yeah, that should normally give me a better understanding of the environment. So I want to make sure that everyone understands this is not me looking for metrics or numbers to throw back at the user and saying, well, you claimed it's slow. Look, the scorecard is saying it's actually faster. That's not my intent. Let's put that disclaimer in here first. But for me, it's very important, based on those metrics, to get a better understanding of what the impact of changes is on my environment, so I can better predict if some updates are need to be monitored even more closely than others.
Absolutely. Yeah, this is all definitely a little bit more from the understanding perspective, right? As we get into individual troubleshooting where you might need to interface with a user, that's where we have a little bit more of that drill-in type of interface that we were looking at before. But
Yep.
something like a report's really going to help you from a environment operations and design even perspective to understand, as I make a change, what is that doing to my actual end users, and relate the end user to the operations that you're doing, as opposed to maybe trying to go backwards on that front.
I really like the scorecard and how you're like really able to zoom in on each and every session and get like a good understanding of what that user experience is and why a user is reporting the incident, so to speak. I think that
Absolutely.
also will help us in maybe even better explaining to the user why it's occurring, or why they are experiencing it. So also their experience becomes better in how their incidents are being handled, and their own learning experience for future. Well, I'm not going to say
Absolutely.
incidents. Obviously, there are now not going to be any future incidents after this.
Yeah.
So I know we briefly talked about the logon process, and especially also about user profiles. Because I think we're kind of already mentioned how maybe application updates can also be impacted, because you already showed us the scorecard and how you can really pinpoint on what change occurred on the different components and what can be that, or what is the a measured impact of those changes. But I think we didn't really zoom in on how we're going to actually look at profile issues, for instance, because my experience is that that can also be a very challenging incident to really do a root cause analysis on.
Sure, absolutely. And I think another sort of layout of the kind of scorecards that I think might be helpful for something like understanding profiles are going to be different user to user, right? So understanding how different maybe departments or subsections of users are being impacted by something like profile load is going to be critically important. Two things that I kind of want to go through here. One being one of our newer reports out of the technology here. I'll go ahead and pull it up on a little bit of a screen here, where you can actually see a distribution of user experience across the entirety of the environment. So whether it's logon or even just in-session slowness, creating a user experience score out of 100 to understand based on industry best practices out of the box, or your own sort of SLAs or expectations you might want to apply to your user sessions. Able to see how my users are distributed across the different levels of kind of user experience, and then break those down by, and in this example, I have a couple of different, say, subnets for network locations, but in something like a profile case, it might be really important to get this broken down by something like user's department or organizational unit that they belong to, which is going to govern not only things like the policies applied, but also those profiles and how they're configured and what expectations we have for those users. So to be able to group them together and understand how we're doing at best, and you'll even see like a lower 10% here, how we're doing at worst, who's really experiencing the worst within the subsection here is going to be a really important way to kind of understand how those issues are surfacing.
Yeah, but that also gives me a quick entry point on what we like to call the low-hanging fruits, where you realize, oh, if I'm able to improve on this particular logon experience, then I instantly get that red number back to maybe orange or even back to green. So
hopefully green, exactly, right? And the kind of at the next step, right, when we take that overview of the user sessions, understanding where the biggest impacts are, we obviously want to start drilling into those. So luckily, with a breakdown like this, you'll actually see a very similar interface on our front page of the technology here, where we can actually live interface with some of this data. So if I need to break this down by my organizational units, the different users in those sort of configurations, and then understand maybe for my engineering folks who are saving quite a lot of data locally, a lot of the time, what the experience looks like for them, and drill in to see, even at the complex level, if folks are using things like standard Citrix profile management, or even something third party such as like a FS Logics solution as part of the logon process, able to get full visibility into that. Not only as part of the logon process that I showed you, sort of familiar page at this point, seeing that breakdown, but also an ability to drill into things like, how is my server performing at the start of the session? Are we seeing things like a spike in disk latency as we try and load that profile in the first few minutes of the session that I need to be aware of? Or the various storages that those profiles are going to be reliant on, how are those responding, performing, or impacting users in correlation with the rest of their experience?
Yeah, I have to admit, that's one of my experiences. And this is not naming and shaming, but using FS Logics, for instance, I know how important it is that not just it's on premium storage or premium SSD storage solutions, but I've also seen some issues where there was not enough free space on the storage layers that also impacted on how the profiles or the profile disks basically were performing, to make it not FS Logic specific.
Of course. But yeah, across the board here, right, helping us to understand if maybe there was an app server, maybe even a virtualization layer issue that I need to be taking a look at, that might be impacting higher levels of users. But even at the sort of nitty gritty, right, maybe we just need to take a look at logs. What's happening for those users? Are we seeing failures occurring at any point that I might need to investigate?
Yep.
Profile failed to attach, containers, corrupted, something like that, that I would really want to be aware of, can be also surfaced for you after 2-3 clicks during the troubleshooting process to understand where those impacts are coming from.
Yeah, that makes sense. And this already feels way better than having to do like IOPS calculations yourself to figure out if you're still within those thresholds that you maybe established during your baseline.
Exactly.
Oh, I can watch this for many hours. I saw I was getting mesmerized by the different graphs. Sorry, people. I'm really nerding out here.
But yeah, even just like an upfront view, right? Before we even have to drill into some of those,
Yep.
to be able to see if there's like an outlying spike within something like the storage latency on my host, or maybe even, and in some cases I've actually seen this, if the user doesn't have enough connectivity to get into that session to load through the entire logon process, that can dramatically slow things down. So understanding even what that local connectivity looks like at the start of the session, again, tied to each and every one and able to be investigated as needed, tends to be, I think, for a lot of our customers, really, really helpful.
That makes sense. So I have one question that we didn't basically talk about during preparation of this webinar, but can you also see the power of correlating those different data sets and see and because I'm trying to figure out if I can really become more a proactive administrator or engineer of my environment than just having to basically wait and being triggered by an incident that a user reports and see if I can shift more to that proactive management of my environment. So I know one of the really cool options that you offer, not just for the historical data, but that live data as well, is the ability to correlate, for instance, between network latency and end user experience, or why some of the users are experiencing a slow logon process, for instance.
Yeah, absolutely. And I find that's kind of one of the key things a lot of our users are tends to be looking for and can normally achieve with the presentation of the data here is that ability to kind of get proactive. You don't have to wait for a user to complain about experience before you start looking into and even solving that issue for them, right? Nobody calls IT on a regular basis to say, hey, you're doing a great job, right? Luckily,
True.
or hopefully on a day-to-day basis, as you start managing the environment, you kind of want those phones to quiet down a bit, right? The less calls you're getting, unless someone's really, really happy and wants to congratulate you, the better. And so an ability to take a look with something like, and you can even start back at things like our scorecards, right? So back at
Yep.
something like our distribution, understanding who's impacted, be able to drill into that with a little bit more of a detailed scorecard as well. Same metrics, now breaking this down into the individual users. Those bottom 10%, I have them right here. Do they depend on a particular location, type of client device, or even workspace version that might be, say, behind in some cases that I need to be aware of? And then the product doing a bit of this correlation already for you if there's something like a network latency impact or issue impacting users. Connection speeds are falling where we have a lack of available bandwidth for users. And then the ability to take something like this and drill straight into those impacted users, say like the 10 that are here. I can filter my dashboard using the top here to see the same kind of subset or cut of the data. And then I have them called out right here, where if I need to go take a look at those users, even side by side, just understanding the couple of columns here can really be important so that we know if there's a common location or a common factor that's impacting these users that I need to be aware of to be able to fix. And again, none of these users submitted a ticket yet, at least. And so I can start to get ahead of that by just looking at some of the data from scorecard baselining and then looking at some of the distribution here, even with assistance from the product to help you do some of that analysis.
Yeah, because one of the examples that comes to mind is, for instance, if I'm using Teams on my VDI environment or my Citrix desktop, one of the, well, of course, we can talk a full hour about Teams annoyances, but that's like a definitely a different webinar. But one of the things that I noticed, especially these last couple of months, is that Teams has the tendency of downloading in the background different updates, but at the same time, it does bring down the quality of your video, or maybe even the ability to have your video up and running. So it would be awesome if these correlations or the scorecard even allows me to zoom in on why are people now saying that Citrix is slow, and basically meaning that the team's performance within Citrix is not optimal.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, and we even actually have back from the sort of alerting that we talked about at the very beginning, abilities to even pick up on, is Teams operating in a HDX optimized mode, right? Some of those just simple things, luckily able to surface for you, even outside the delivery infrastructure within the product here, to be able to show you how many users might be affected by an individual type of alert, and then see whether it's in our demo lab. I don't have a ton of Teams issues running right now, but
which is a good thing.
yeah, true. But if we have that sort of storm of, hey, optimizations are falling and we're starting to see potential impacts here, you can even get that heads up alert right from here without, again, having to receive those tickets from users to start investigating.
Yeah, you could probably also, due to the fact that you are logging like versions of different applications, even pinpoint those that are, for instance, using more the classic
Right?
Teams
Yeah, who's running
interface,
behind or something like that,
yeah,
exactly.
and more likely to get those updates and basically forced instead of it being more an optional opt-in.
100%.
Awesome. Then I'm just quickly gonna eye Kiri and see if there are any questions that we can address.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I missed everything you and Martin have been talking about. I've been so active in the chat with all the questions that have come through. It's been great. You guys are a lively bunch. So we'll go ahead and tackle some of them. We won't have a chance to get to all of them, but we'll go ahead and tackle some of them. One question, Martin, for you. They use Citrix DAS. How does Goliath work with Citrix Cloud?
Yeah, great question. It's going to be the exact same, luckily. So everything you've seen today is pretty much going to be available for something like a Citrix DAS environment, regardless of where your users or their resources are hosted. Be able to get all of that ability to drill into things like the logon performance, the in-session performance, as well as those different alerts across the environment.
Another question, Martin. VDAs in the US, of course, there's an offshore team. Is there ability to set thresholds so that the offshore team doesn't trigger all the alerts that, because their connectivity is going to be a little weaker than the US mainland. So talk a little bit about that. That was the crux of the question.
Yeah, great question. So generally within the product, things like our alerts can be customized based on the source of, say, like the users. So if you want to predefine something like a subnet or access point type of user that you want to set an alert or threshold on, you can do that. That way, the different users who might be, say, dragging down global connectivity, for example, can be filtered out, whether it's in these graphs or kind of within, say, things like our reports are especially important for that type of stuff.
Yeah, so that allows you to basically have a different alert rule configured for those offshore workers that are maybe using more satellite connections instead of your office workers that are using the local LAN connectivity.
Exactly.
Another question. I'll take this one because this is kind of related but unrelated. Question is, someone saw an announcement about our Epic launch this week. They want to know a little bit more about that. So if you're a health system and you are using Epic, we've just launched this week our Epic Clinician Experience Suite. So it is focused on clinician experience. So for the people on this call, the relevant parts are around the Citrix and the IT delivery infrastructure, with health checks around the delivering components that are responsible for delivering Epic, responsible for Citrix as well as digging into clinician experience and getting to root cause of what clinicians are complaining about when it comes to slowness. So more to come on that. If you're interested in learning more, by all means, let me know, and we can set some time to talk a little bit more about that. There was a question around just how do they get a closer look. Claudia, who you can't see, but she's working in the background. Thank you, Claudia. She's dropping some links in the chat as well for anybody that wants a demo or a trial. You are welcome to click on those links. You can just say demo or trial in the chat as well, and we'll follow up with you if that's something that you're interested in. Martin, there was a question on, we got another minute left. There was a question around data retention. They want to know how far back the reports go. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Oh, you're still on mute.
You're muted, Martin.
Thank you for that call out. Luckily, it's a pretty simple sort of concept there as far as the retention in Goliath. So it can be configured to retain as much data as you need. By default, the product comes with about 30 days of full granular retention of all the data for being able to go through it in the UI like you saw today, as well as for reporting. And oftentimes folks will either turn that up or down depending on what they need. Common range is going to be things like 30 to 90 days, and then generally generating reports, summaries, and scorecards that can be exported out to a central location so you can reference those in a bit more of an archive.
Oh, nice. And does that also mean that I can also specify how much metrics, like how detailed do I want the data to be stored?
Yeah, depending on how you configure each report and how you'd want it to come out of the technology, it can then just be sent out to wherever you'd like that data stored, a share, a data lake, or something like that you'd like to want to interface with.
So I can make a difference between hot and cold storage, for instance.
Essentially, yep.
Awesome.
There was a question.
I didn't even knew that.
There was a question about AI. We didn't get too deep into that, although you saw it working in the background. So in some of the dashboards that Martin was showing, you saw some root cause identification populated in the dashboard, some correlation. So AI working there as well. Martin didn't have a chance to. I don't think I was busy furiously chatting back and forth with people. So if I missed it, I'm sorry. But we do also have the AI assistant, troubleshooting assistant as well. So it becomes a Citrix expert. It becomes Esther, basically, when you can't pick up the phone and just call Esther and ask her how to fix something. The AI troubleshooting assistant will help with that as well. So that is also.
That will be the next best thing to be.
That'll be the next best thing to having Esther's phone number. But I'll drop Esther's phone number in the chat in case everybody
Please
wants.
do.
Last question. This was a question from a partner. Just wondering if we enable partners to do troubleshooting as a service. So I assume this is how partners who want to work with customers and provide services to customers who maybe have small IT teams and aren't resourced to do some of this troubleshooting on their own. We absolutely provide it as a service ourselves, and we work with our partners and train up our partners to provide it as a service on behalf of their customers. That's it. There are several more questions, but we are out of time. I appreciate you guys being so active in the chat. Esther, it is always a ton of fun having you on these sessions, so thank you so much for being part of it. And Martin, great job. Thank you for walking through the technology as well. And thank you to everyone who joined the session. Stay tuned for our next Troubleshooting Masterclass as part of our series. We'll let you know when that is scheduled. All right, take care, everyone, and thanks again.
Thanks for your time, everybody.
Bye-bye.